are. This is Tom Osman, and you're listening to Whatever Comes Next. It's the podcast where I explore the world of underground and independent music making, and today I'm very glad to be sharing with you my conversation with country-goth artist Del Judas. And if you're thinking to yourself, country-goth, is that a genre? Well, it is, because Del Judas is that. However, having said that, part of the reason why we had this conversation is Del Judas is promoting his latest single, Angela. In fact, the first material he's released since his debut album, Deity, in 2017. And if you've heard the song, you will likely say, hang on a minute, that doesn't sound like country goth at all, which was basically my reaction. And that's kind of the first topic that we get into. But as becomes clear, talking with Del Judas, he's got a very broad range of different musical styles and projects and backgrounds that have kind of like taken him to the point where he is now. So if you listen to, or if you've heard his debut album, Deity, you will recognize a lot of, I would say, sort of 80s goth rock, post-punk elements. Like from my point of view, I thought I heard like Sisters of Mercy, Bauhaus, that kind of thing. I think Del Judas in the interview mentions Fields of the Nephilim. I hope I've pronounced that name correctly. But basically that kind of atmosphere to the music. And as I say, Angela is something quite different. It's a bit more of a sort of expansive Bruce Springsteen style 80s rock. Very beautiful, I think, lyrical songwriting, but something quite different. So yeah, we get into talking about that, and we don't get into it too much, but Del Judas is in fact working on his next album, the full-length follow-up to Deity, and we talk about how a lot of that is going to be darker again. Scott Walker is a name that does come up in the interview, and I think if you listen to Deity, you'll definitely hear a bit of Scott Walker in there. And as we discuss, that is a relevant reference point for the forthcoming album. But as I say, a part of the focus of the interview is talking about Angela, and talking about how the song came about, talking about how Del Judas got from Deity to this point, why there was such a gap, as well as getting into some of the really interesting backstory, his time playing drums in extreme metal bands, his basically day gig as a crooner. There's a lot of really interesting ground to cover. It was a really great discussion, and I enjoyed it a lot. And hopefully, when the time comes to promote the next album, we'll be able to have another conversation, because I think there's definitely more to be discussed. Now, something really cool which Del Judas and his band have got coming up is a little event with a company called Leestaval. That's Leestaval. And basically what the band is going to do is they're going to go to Brooklyn on the 10th of April, and they're going to record 2 songs, Dancing with the Dead from Deity and Angela. But the twist is that for every person that pre-orders the vinyl copy, they are going to go into the studio and they're going to record a one-of-a-kind take. So if you pre-order a copy of the vinyl, you will get one performance that nobody else is going to have. So it's a very cool concept, and you can find more details about that and how to pre-order from the Del Judas Facebook or Instagram. That's Del Judas Official. You can also go to the Del Judas website, deljudas.com, or if you want, you can go to Leestaval. That's leestaval.com/products/Del Judas. Now, as things stand here on the evening of Monday, April the 1st, or the 1st of April, I should say as a European, there is an important to-do that I have yet to do, which is to transfer this podcast onto YouTube and onto Apple Music. So at the moment, we are on, I say we, like the royal we, this podcast is on Substack, where it started, and Spotify. So I guess you're listening to this on either one of those 2 platforms, or you're somewhere in the future where I actually have put it on YouTube and Apple Music, and you're listening there. Anyway, if you are listening to this as it comes out, that's where it is. And I have a small request to make of you, if you have not done so already. If you're listening on Substack, please subscribe. If you are listening on Spotify and you're enjoying this, and you have enjoyed previous episodes, please do me a favor and just give a nice little 5-star rating on Spotify. It'll help me to, promote the podcast and to book more great guests in the future. Other than that, just, enjoy the podcast. I'm going to play a little clip from Angela before the interview, and I'm going to play the track in full at the end. And I think that's it. And all there is left to say is, Del Judas, take it away. Here partly to talk about Angela, which is a great anthemic, melancholic as well, I would say, rock song. One thing I would say, to me, it doesn't really seem very gothic. And so Del Judas has previously been referred to as country gothic or country goth.
Right.
So are you still country goth, or are you something different now?
No, I'm still country goth. Maybe I'm in my heartland rock phase right now, where I'm kind of just blurring the lines, swerving in and out of lanes. But I've always had an affinity for that kind of music, that sort of Springsteenian 80s kind of vibe. I didn't want any time to go by before I wrote a song like that. I wanted to have a song like that that gave a little bit of that feel in that genre. So no, in a longer answer to your question, no, I haven't really. The next album that I'll be coming out with, which is a total of about 9 songs right now, it looks like 9 songs, get back actually further into that 60s Gothic Americana with some twinges of a Tarantino-esque goth vibe, which, I'm still finding my way through what that genre means to me. So,
well, this is probably going to be opening up a big can of worms by asking you this question, but it's been 6 years since your first album as Del Judas, Deity. Obviously, we all collapsed into this black hole of COVID, but can you say a bit about the break and what got you from Deity, which, as we've already touched on, sounds very different to Angela? How did you get from there to here?
It's not too big of a can of worms. It's basically, I work in New York as a professional musician, drummer, and a singer, guitar player. So I dabble in quite a few genres, and I just think, Deity to me it just kind of was rolled out from a time when I was playing with a lot of darker, heavier metal bands and such as a drummer.
Yeah.
And that album is a little more reflective with the kind of music and style that I was surrounded with at the time. Since then, I've made some different inroads career-wise. I've began performing more as a singer and doing more of what you consider to be like a crooner kind of thing. I do a lot of Dean Martin and Sinatra and stuff like that for events, and it's a weird job, but it's tailored just for me, I feel. So, I'm always going to kind of channel whatever feels authentic in that moment. So, without going too far into it, I wouldn't want to write another Deity again, only because for me, it was a time and a place, and like a little sort of a little bit like a timestamp or time capsule, if you will, of what was going
Mm.
on in my life, a snapshot. And so moving on from that, I feel as though my vocal style has changed a little bit. My approach to crafting music has changed a little bit. So some elements have come in that have really shaped the landscape in a different way for me. So, and it'll continue to change. If you come across my next record, it'll definitely have more of what my band and I call sort of a, a Vegas country goth '60s sound. So, yeah, I'm wanting to go all over the map
Yep.
stylistically though, because I can, and because I feel as though when we receive these ideas for songs, they need to be honored in a way that is really you're sort of pulling a vibration from the ether, and you're like, okay, this you want to be out into the world. It's almost like a living entity. So I coddle it and finish it and birth it out into the world, and then the world can do with it what it likes. But I've played Angela a few times live, and I got to say it's fun. It's more fun than some of my other songs, I feel. So I'm happy with it.
Yeah, well, I was kind of interested in from that point of view. Like, I guess well, you have a consistent band, right? So, how consistently have you been playing and touring with your band, and how consistent has that lineup been?
The lineup has been really relatively consistent. I did a tour right before COVID in 2019 in Eastern Europe, along with Toby Driver, who's a friend of mine and from KO Dot and all these other bands. He's played with Secret Chiefs and whatnot. So yeah, we had a really awesome run in Eastern Europe, and I just went out solo because at the time I wasn't able to take the other three members with me. But when we play live in the States, we do mainly just like the tri-state area here in the US. I haven't done any West Coast dates or any Midwest dates. I was supposed to do South by Southwest, but unfortunately due to COVID, that was canceled.
Hmm.
And I never really found my footing again with getting out live. But right now, yeah, Del Judas consists of drummer, a bass player, another guitarist, and myself. And so that's how we play those songs live.
And in terms of the recording session that produced Angela, were there other songs kind of in that vein that you were working on, or was this always sort of its own singular entity in terms of the music that you've made as Del Judas?
I have I have a few songs that are kind of partnered with that sound, and I haven't finished them yet because I've been working on this other record. But yeah, there were, I think, two or three other ideas that were living alongside that song at the time. So yeah, I will finish them. Just right now, they're not. It's not like a pressing thing to get them done, but I will be excited to finish them in the future. So
And going back to Deity, so I feel like, and tell me if this is your impression too, the first track, which I think was also a single, Dancing with the Dead, was that the single from the album?
that would be considered a single from the album. Yeah,
I know in this day and age, like the term of what a single is isn't always necessarily so clear as it was in the past, but I feel like you kind of you sort of released it online as an individual track, if I'm not wrong.
that's right. I did. I re-released that album under my own name. The label that was carrying that record, I guess, didn't renew the what you'd consider to be the
The
like the
license.
distro license.
Mm.
Thank you. Yeah. And so I just re-released Deity under my own name.
Because the impression that I had, like for anybody that listens to the album and Angela or listens to Angela then goes back to the album, it's clearly it's clear that there are a lot of differences. But one thing I felt was that Dancing with the Dead is more kind of poppy. It almost actually, I don't know if this is a reference that would mean much to you, but it reminded me a little bit of Pulp. Do you ever listen to Pulp?
Oh, sure. Yeah, definitely.
But then as the album progresses, it just gets so much darker. And I might have misremembered this, but I think there's a track where you're singing about drinking blood. Um, it's very gothic. Like it
Yeah.
reminded me of all kinds of sort of post-punk bands like Bauhaus, even like a bit of Sisters of Mercy, um, Nick Cave. I mean, I feel like Scott Walker is kind of through, maybe not Angela, but I feel like there's a lot of Scott Walker running through what you do. But it did seem to me that Deity is almost like the first track is a little bit like reeling people in, like, don't worry, it's safe in here. And then it gets like really, 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 really dark. So I wonder if that's kind of an impulse that you have in general that maybe Angela sort of taps into. You like to bring people in with something catchy and anthemic, and then you go, by the way, check out the darkness that we're about to get into.
Yeah, it's almost like, I'm sort of cut from the comedian's cloth. It's, on stage it's all fun and laughter, and then when you look at their lives, it's like, whoa, there's a lot of sadness in there. Ironically, Tom, the Dancing with the Dead was the last song I wrote
Huh.
that record. So it's almost that's a very interesting insight you have there and very perceptive. So it actually, yeah, it got more poppy as the last song was written. And I was like, oh, I'll put this on the first track. I think the first track I wrote for Deity would be Through the Glass, which was a very, very sultry sort of, it had a sense of, being forlorn and very, very low energy moon glow to that song. And then, yeah. And then Little White Churches was the song you were referring to, which is, just about themes of separation and love lost and things like that. It's most of what I write from anyway. But yeah, it's so basically the 5 or 6 songs that come before Dancing with the Dead were all written prior, and then Dancing with the Dead was written last. So already I was kind of on my way out of the woods, the dark forest, if you will, and on into some other areas. And I think, for Deity, for all intents and purposes, I think as a record, as the sole writer of that record, I was just playing with some textures and overtones and things like that. And I was listening to a lot of Fields of the Nephilim back then.
That totally makes sense. Yeah.
Right.
Just in terms of like that atmosphere, that kind of like gothic post-punk atmosphere.
Yeah, very washy guitars, heavy long reverbs, things like that, that I really took away from those from those records. And in terms of Deity as its own record, I think it all kind of sits cohesively as this, like you were saying, like this kind of darker installment. And I don't know if I could ever go back and be that dark again, honestly. There's been a lot that's transpired in my life that's, we say like to live is to remember. There's been a lot of spiritual development in my own person. I mean, I think it would be cool to write a bunch of deities back to back, and then you'd be a little more marketable as an artist. But where's the fun though in that? Just making the same thing over and over again. So
from that point of view of the progression, are there any songs from that album that you wouldn't play live anymore, that you feel it's kind of like that's closed now?
No, I think it's all up for grabs. One thing I do have to say as a vocalist, though, those songs are hard to pull off live because of how low the vocals are. So the band behind me, the guys I use are terrific New York City musicians. They know when we're playing a song that sounds like it's hitting real hard, like Dancing with the Dead, that the volume on stage has got to be very low because the vocals will just never be heard.
Yeah.
Very hard to pull those songs off in terms of doing a fully mic'd and rigged live stage show. So it's almost in a way, all those songs need to be performed semi-acoustically, where, it's kind of have like an unplugged sort of feel. So you can get all the nuances of the vocalizations.
That does make a lot of sense. This is going off on a bit of a tangent, but I've thought about that before with Swans. Are you much of a fan of Swans and Michael Gira?
Sure. Yeah.
So I love almost everything by Swans, but I particularly love the early 90s era of like White Light from the Mouth of Infinity and Love of Life. And
Mhm.
something that I noticed is that on the record, a lot of the time he's singing in sort of like as deep as he can go. And then I heard live bootlegs of some of those songs, and he would sing an octave higher. And I guess it's kind of to your point that when you've got the whole band around you, it's very, very difficult to project when you're singing at your lowest possible tone.
Yeah, and that's, when I went to Eastern Europe, I just did my set with backing tracks. So I basically pulled all of the instruments together from the Logic files and put them into one MP3 and then just sang over them. And I think that was a pretty stellar representation of the songs because everything had the right amount of compression. I can control the volume on stage. I could sing over it in a way that I didn't have to strain or stress. It didn't sound out of place. So yeah, I had to do that. But playing it live is that's really cool that you said that. There's some songs that I would like to change the key of live,
Hmm.
like Dancing, that actually do it up a couple of steps, so it projects a little more.
Yeah. Well, you've touched on sort of the variety of your musical background, and you've mentioned being a drummer, and a couple of bands that I'm aware of. There's Tombs, and there's also Vora. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes, yes,
So I also wanted to ask you something which I think might predate that. You were a student of the Aaron Copland School of Music, if I have this correct.
yes.
Where does that tie into your previous history of different bands and different musical projects?
When I was out of college, I was experimenting with a lot of different styles as a drummer. I sang a lot in college as well. I did a lot of vocal ensemble and did a semester of Gregorian chant and different styles such as that. And I think when I got out of college, I was trying to find my way as mainly as a percussionist, and I was kind of just dabbling in some darker bands. And it was a different time in New York too. A lot has changed since that since that era of, I mean, I guess if you want to put a date on it, it would be somewhere around anywhere from 2008 to 2012, 13. Uh, and I have to admit, like, I don't like playing drums for for bands, essentially. Uh, Not to blemish my own record or like to push away any future work in any way, shape, or form. But my life really changed when I started playing for event bands, and I
Hmm.
just started only doing covers for events. And I had to really learn how to play those covers the way that the studio musicians played them. So if I'm doing like an Earth, Wind, and Fire tune, really learning how to play that pocket effectively, that changed the way I looked at music completely. And I got farther and farther away from attempting to play blast beats or really fast bass drum work, and just more into finding my own way as really as a musician, but mostly as a drummer. And I kind of just fell out of love with a lot of music I was playing at that time,
Mm.
uh, which you know it didn't bode well for my friendships or anything like that. It caused, yeah, quite a lot of rifts and whatnot. And when you want to do your own thing and you kind of want to separate out from where you're at in that point in life, yeah, you're going to rub some people the wrong way, unfortunately. And I went off on my own. I did my own thing, and I just really just started delving into more classic repertoire as a drummer. And yeah, and I just kind of moved away from. I was touring a lot at the time too. I toured a lot with Tombs, and it was tough. It was tough because I would tour and I would play, and every night would be different. Some nights would be packed, and some nights wouldn't. And then I would come back to New York and I would play events, and it was like, hey, I'm playing 2-3 hours. I'm getting dinner, a really awesome rate, and I get to sleep in my own bed. And it was just like the choice was clear. It was like, you know, and Del Judas was kind of born out of that. I was like, well, I still want to make music. So let me step into this role and do this now. So yeah.
Because it seems from the outside that you did step from one into the other quite quickly. Like I think the last Tombs album you had was 2017, and then
Mhm.
Deity was 2018. So were you already writing what would become Del Judas songs when you were on the road with Tombs?
Yeah, I was actually. I was playing around with some sketches and some ideas, and I was writing some lyrics and trying some different things. And yeah, it came. So it was pretty much a fast transition straight out of Tombs and into Del Judas. So
Yeah. And in terms of the what you've taken from being a drummer, I mean, on Deity and maybe even on, on the Angela recording sessions, are you still playing drums? Are you still doing percussion? Are you writing drum parts, or how actively are you now involved or uninvolved with the drumming side of things?
I played drums on Angela, and I played the drums on Deity as well. Uh, and Deity, because it was a bedroom album, I played all the instruments on that record. So piano, bass, drums, organs, and guitars. Uh, on Angela was my friend Steve on bass, who now plays with us, and I played drums. So we went into a small studio around the corner called Brick by Brick, and we just tracked the drums and bass live. And then my guitarist Evan put the solo at the end. He did that whole thing. I wrote it. He played it. He watched me play it several times, and he was like, "All right, dude, just let me."
Let me take over
like,
now.
yeah, he's like a professional guitarist. I mean, I'm in my mind, writing wise, I'm professional, but like, I don't know that you want to see me like walk into a blues club and try to hold my own. But yeah, it's been opening up a little more to other outside performances from people that I love to use. My friend Fred, who plays drums, he's going to be on the next record. And when we tracked the songs, I sang and played guitar. He played drums, Steve on bass, and then Evan on guitar. So we kind of did a live sort of an amalgamation of the performances. And then from there, I might overdub a guitar here or put an organ patch there or something. So it's nice to just be the singer guitar player now and not have to worry about drums,
Yeah.
which I'm always contextualizing feel though. Like that the drum track on Angela, like I think of that drum track as like maybe the way Mick Fleetwood would have played it.
Hmm.
It's got that little like sort of lilt on the end of two, like dun, 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 gives it that sort of like that moving quality. So I'm always thinking in terms of that, and how what would it sound like if this drummer played it, or what would it sound like if that drummer played it. And I think in that way, stylistically, you're starting to not only revive older styles, but you're kind of making them new again, because the song is it's a newly composed song. So I'm always
Yeah.
kind of thinking about that feel.
And in terms of the production, so did you actually entirely self-produce Deity as well?
Yeah, the guitarist that works with me, Evan McCullough, he mixed the record. We mixed the record together, sort of in tandem, and then Colin Marston mastered it. Colin's responsible for so many amazing black metal and progressive records. So that's a good pace for me, because the mixing process is, I like to make my music on Logic, and I
Hmm.
like the Logic reverb plates. And I can tell right away when somebody puts the music into Pro Tools, because it just doesn't sound the same and it kills the vibe. So I've been through many iterations of people working with Pro Tools, and I'm not about it. I can't. It's like when I heard that, I believe Phineas, who's Billie Eilish's brother, mostly writes the music on Logic, I was like, yes, like
One for
another
the team.
Logic guy, because Pro Tools I always say, Pro Tools to me makes everything sound like a potato chip, just like super crispy and crackly, and I can't do it. I just can't do it. I need softer, like you mentioned Scott Walker, and records of that time, when I'm talking about the Walker brothers.
Yep.
Roy Orbison, those soundstage recordings are beautiful. They are so beautiful. And it's because you had about 20 or 30 musicians crammed into like a, a basketball court sized stage with just a few microphones up. And you're hearing the best performances that they got those days.
Yeah.
And the reverb is a natural occurrence and they can't get it off the tracks. And when Scott sings into those ribbon microphones, it's the same thing. He's not in a closed booth with sound treatment and whatnot. I mean, it's the argument I always make for early jazz sounds so, jazz of the 50s sounds so incredible because it was just a couple microphones up in a larger room and those reverbs were naturally occurring when the musicians were playing. And then they started close miking jazz and it was like, we got to go back the other way. But, music is always, technology is always is a progressive thing.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. It's like I sometimes I am resistant to various technology, but equally I don't want to be a Luddite about things and say like I'm not into this because it's a new thing.
Right. You see, I feel like that's a little bit of my role as an artist is to kind of be that guy and be a little sort of crotchety about like, there's new stuff going on that's cool. I like the new stuff. Keep doing the new stuff. Synthesizers and new ways of playing, quantizing, recording drums and whatnot. But I prefer the old styles, which is where I derive a lot of my inspiration from to begin with. So,
So what's your opinion about kind of like the analog versus digital debate?
that's very interesting because I've actually I recorded drums to tape for this next record that I am coming out with, and we did the whole thing, all the mics running through the board into the tape machine, and it was warmer and fuzzier, but you really couldn't manipulate it the way you would want to if it was in a digital setting.
Mm.
So I find that it's weird. It's like I like the aspects of digital, but making it sound a little bit older or a little bit, like maybe this record came from the 70s or the 80s or the 60s. We don't know, but it's got sort of those throwback textures in it to how it was recorded and manipulated. So I prefer the digital aspect of it in
Mm.
terms, you know, uh, in terms of how music is recorded, because it is easier to backtrack and change things if you want as well, which I'm a big fan of. I mean, in fact, I drive a lot of people nuts because I constantly change my mind.
In terms of like how you want to sing like vocal parts?
Vocal parts, arrangements, I've scrapped entire mixes and been like, nah, it's got to start over from this. I've gone into studios and worked with people before and like got the songs like right up to the finish line and was like, I'm not releasing these. Total waste of money, waste of everyone's time. And I always remember my sister being like, you sure? You change your mind a lot. And the fact that she knew that about me made me be like both offended and felt loved and seen. It's like, yeah, I do change a lot, you know? And I think that, that's kind of the plight of the artist.
Mm.
That's the beauty of art. I get it. We live in a world today where it's like, you gotta create, I hate the word content.
Mm.
Content. It's like, I don't know, man. Content is what you find at the bottom of a puppy's cage, But it's like making something real beautiful and real that you want to be part of and take place in creating. It's like, yeah, you're going to change your mind a lot. You're going to backtrack and change things. And I think the digital aspect of recording music helps us do that very, very avidly. So
Yeah. And in terms of the recording session for Angela, so you've had various experiences in the past, different projects, different various recording sessions for different musical projects. Was there anything particularly different in terms of the way that you were working? I mean, I guess you haven't released anything that sounds like this in terms of the production before. How much was this taking what you'd done previously versus bringing in new elements, aside from the sound of the actual song itself?
in the studio, right off the bat, I went in just with a checklist, like a punch list. I want the snare drum to be tuned real low. I want that 80s kind of snare drum. So we played with some muting and some tuning the drum down and getting it so that it sits low in the mix. And then in terms of selecting the drum kit, well, my buddy John, I think he owns 2 drum kits, but we just used one of the ones that he had, which was like a 70s Ludwig, like recreated Ludwig, like rock and roll kit. So pretty sizable bass drum, I think a 22-inch bass drum. And then the bass, we just went direct and put a microphone on it. And, we just kind of set the levels and just started playing it. Ironically, though, I have to say, if you and what's ironic, what I'm about to say is how weird the phrasing is in that song. There are measures of 6 that are placed every other bar in the verses, and if you try to tap it out, it's really confusing. So again, this is one of those things where I couldn't really make up my mind when writing this song, and it just ended up being like a couple of different takes of the verses. So it drove my bass player friend who works with me, Steve, it drove him nuts, because it was just, I was like, well, this change needs to take place here, and this holds over by 2 beats there. And we just did a bunch of takes, and we got it eventually. So that was like a kind of a weird fun fact about that song. And then when I record the other things at home, I just use some good AKGs, and I just recorded the acoustics at home. For the guitar player that works with me, Evan, he has his own. We actually work for the same company, which is funny. We both work for the same event company, but he does the live band side of it, and I do like DJs and drumming and singing and stuff as well. And I also play with live bands, but he had his own way of wanting to record the guitars. So he used his amp, 57 on the cone, and an AKG set back about 2 feet, and his pedal board, which he kind of dialed in the tones and got it. So he's really responsible for that entire tone and texture of the guitars, which to me, when I listen back to them, I'm like, oh, it's really interesting, like how he kind of selected. It's got a little bit of flange on it and a little bit of compression and distortion, and he just got it to a really great place. And then in terms of the vocals, I just use a SM7B Shure microphone, which is technically a podcast microphone. But I suppose as far as the dynamic range of that microphone, it picks up the lower end of people's voices. So it has a natural compression to it, which works really well with my voice because I tend to sing a little bit on the lower side. And so, yeah, that was, so I did about just the bass and drums in the studio, and then just did the rest at home. Again, I did the rest at home so I could change my mind constantly.
Without someone standing over your shoulder judging you.
Yeah, or being like, okay, so you want to undo this? It's like, yeah, could we? And change a lyric here or there, or change a vocal melody. So to have that freedom is
yeah. Well, kind of to your point of what you were saying about the phrasing, one of the things that stood out to me, I think even the first time I listened to the song, is it started off, and it clearly, it does have that intentional sort of 80s sound harking back to Bruce Springsteen. So it sort of gives this recognizable feel at the beginning, but very quickly, as I was listening to the lyrics and I was listening to the phrasing, I was kind of going, oh, I didn't think he was going to do that. Like I was expecting it to go in certain places, and it just has these subtle deviations, which I like. It's a very immediate song, but it has subtleties in there. So that definitely came across to me as a listener.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of bends and winds and turns in that song, which, and conventionally, it just sounds like, to me, it sounds like a pretty conventional idea. But the nuances just bring a little bit of different flavor to it, which was not really so much of a happy accident, because we were saying earlier to your point that I have other songs that are sort of like it that eventually I'll finish. And in that way, I like to give those kinds of songs, I like to give them time to create those unconventional ideas of phrasing or other elements that they might come up with. So
Yeah, that's cool. And on April the 19th, I think you've got an event coming up, if it's right to call it an event, the Director Vinyl Live Sessions project. And if I remember correctly, you had some notification about something on the 10th. Could you say a bit about what you've got coming up?
Sure. The direct to vinyl session is actually on the 10th. I misposted on Instagram and said it was the 19th, but I quickly rectified that when uh, one of the people who plays with me pointed it out. Like, hey, I have to work that day, and I was, oh, yeah, no, you don't have to work that day. I scheduled it. I just wrote the wrong post. So that event is happening on the 10th, and it's a pretty cool thing. It's called Least of All uh, in Brooklyn, New York. And what they do is you can make a special order for two songs, and the band will perform it live. And it's a personalized vinyl, so you go through them and order it, and then I play your songs made to order. So we're doing two. We're doing Dancing with the Dead, and we're doing Angela. So if anyone wants to own a vinyl version of either of those songs, or obviously both, they can put an order in. The link is in the Del Judas Instagram bio,
Hmm.
and as well as there's a post on my Del Judas Facebook page that I've recently put up with the correct date. So
And does that need to be done before the 10th?
yes, that needs to be in before the 10th. I assume they could probably do day of, just seeing how we live in the day and age of just instantaneous notifications. So yeah, that would be, and we've already had a few orders, which is nice. And I'm not 100% sure of this, but I think I have to play the song every time somebody orders it.
Mm.
And it's a little daunting, because that means if 20 people order this, that means I have to do Dancing with the Dead and Angela 20 times.
So every person that orders it gets a totally unique version that no one else is going to have.
That's right.
That's
That's
very
right.
cool.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, right? And a friend of mine, Chris Hurd, from a band called Tucker Woods out on Long Island, he just did the sessions, and so I was watching his Instagram and kind of getting a feel for how they were setting up his session, and so I should probably write him and see if that's in fact the case, so I can get mentally prepared for that. It's like harking back to the old days where you have to like play your song 50 times live on the radio or something.
Yeah, well, there you go. It's you're going back into this the authenticity of the 50s and the 60s artists that you're kind of like drawing from to some degree.
Yeah.
So in terms of other things you've got going on, so you've mentioned a bit about the working on the next album. So where are you up to with that? Do you have sort of a timeline? What have you got in the way of shows in the forthcoming weeks and months?
Yeah. Well, we play a lot with a band called Fuck You Tammy, and it's kind of they're a Twin Peaks tribute band.
Ah, cool.
So they're very unique, and they're dear friends of ours, and we just love playing with them because it's an eclectic show. It's kind of a weird show, and we have a little bit of that going on as well with the essence of Del Judas. So we have a gig that actually just was confirmed at a venue called Mama Tried,
Hmm.
and that's in Brooklyn, New York, and that's on April 18th. And then we have some other outside New York shows, or just actually upstate and outside New York shows coming up that are yet to be confirmed, but we're working on a few one-off shows for some weekend runs over the summer. And in terms of the album, it's three-quarters of the way done. We're in the process now of mixing it, which is always an interesting endeavor when you're kind of up in these recording softwares and just throwing all sorts of stuff in the pot, and then you realize maybe I don't have enough, or maybe I have too much, so you might have to scale instruments back, take some things out, redo a vocal take. So I'm doing all that kind of nuts and bolts stuff now for this upcoming record that I have, and it's a way larger installment in terms of instrumentation.
Mm.
Just kind of went for broke. Most of the songs are on a grand scale, highly orchestrated. So there will be strings and organs and piano and bass drums and guitar, obviously, as well as some interesting backing vocals. And I've definitely gotten to my Morricone kind of headspace when I began writing this record, and was kind of trying to marry these worlds of Scott Walker and Roy Orbison, and then mixing in with that these orchestrations of Lee Hazelwood and Nancy Sinatra and some things. It's that Vegas country thing that I've sort of been like wanting to gravitate more towards. So and in terms of vocals, it showcases a lot more of the expansion of my range. So no more lower growly vocals and more higher end. So the timeline for that would actually be probably about this time next year. Mm-hmm. And right now we're just kind of playing around with some different options of whether or not we should just release singles leading up to the record and then the record. Should I approach a label and see if they would just put the whole out? Or so I'm weighing options right now and just trying. I'm actually here in LA right now because I'm going to be filming a video for one of the songs that is on the album. So I know people say music videos are not what they used to be, but I'm like, are you kidding? You're making visual art to your music. Who cares if it's not what it used to be? You get to make all this awesome art with visuals, along with your music. Why would we ever stop doing that?
Well, Angela seems like quite a big project in terms of the video for that. Are you working with the same or some of the same people for the next video?
No, I'm working with a friend of mine out here, Dustin Penrod, who's a camera and production person on film shoots out here in LA, and he's very talented, and we're going to mess with all sorts of different cameras and equipment and lighting. And the video for Angela was my friend Catherine, she's in the industry. She's made music videos before, and she's very talented. And we just went out to Montauk, Long Island to shoot under that sort of canopy of dull light that you get out there, which is great. It's like the sun barely ever comes out in the winter. So, and I just wanted that video to be very to the point, very direct. Again, kind of 80s, sort of like a Rust Belt rock tune. So I think we kind of captured that.
Definitely, yeah. The images of the video totally fit the sound of the song. Yeah, awesome. And it's very cool. Yeah, in terms of people keeping track of what you've got going on, I think you mentioned Instagram and Facebook. Are those the best places for people to follow what's going on with Del Judas?
Yeah, that would be those two outlets are the best. I am on Twitter and I am on TikTok, but TikTok is very overwhelming for me to process what's going on at any given moment. It's kind of funny. Like the few times I got TikTok, I opened it up and it just started playing videos, and I almost dropped my phone. I felt like a caveman looking at a phone for the first time. I was like, oh, what is this? So a lot of people there's a lot of debate, be on TikTok, don't be on TikTok. You're not going to trend well there, whatever. And I get it, but yeah, so Facebook and Instagram are my two outlets where I'll always post news and little things. I have a mailing list also. Actually, I have a website also, deljudas.com, and you can sign up for my mailing list there, which I do kind of a monthly newsletter. I try not to bombard people with too much news because we just live in that day and age. So I just write something once a month or once every 6 weeks and just kind of put the highlights up there.
All right. No, that's very cool. That's good to know. That's a significant addition as well. I understand not wanting to bombard people, but I think it's nice to get that sort of direct contact with the artist.
Yeah, absolutely. I try to make it as heartfelt as possible. I mean, I'm always thrilled when people come to shows or when they check the record out, or maybe they write me, they DM me or something saying, mentioning a track that they like. And then if they come to the show, it's always a nice surprise to put a face with a name, make a connection with somebody. It's a genuine connection, I feel, when you make something that somebody likes, and you kind of then it usually turns out that the backlog of influences is the same as well. So then you've made a friend, and it's a nice thing.
Exactly. Well, it was great talking to you. Thank you for your time. I hope everything goes well with the video of the next single, and I hope you continue to get a good reception for Angela. And yeah, have a great time with the upcoming shows, with the direct to vinyl live sessions project. In a way, I mean, I hope that you have to sing the song 100 times, because then it will show that 100 people are going to have it. And I hope that your voice and your energy maintains through the whole thing.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, me too. Just drink a lot of coffee or something.
That's always the solution, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me on, Tom. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
By all the things they say and all the games they play. I've seen you here before. If I had heart like you, maybe it would help me through. But in the end it all shoots back. Kissing off those final days. Guess I was drunk